Hey everyone, Reed here with Big Strong Book, and today we're going to be going over the first section of Hart Crane's epic poem, The Bridge. So as I mentioned in the introduction, I am reading this from the complete poems of Hart Crane with the introduction by Harold Bloom. The Bridge, if you're following along, starts on page 41, and it extends for a while, but today we're just reading what is essentially the prologue, or it's I think he makes a joke in how he titles it. It's the Proem, the prologue poem, called To Brooklyn Bridge, which this whole thing is about. I'm very certain this whole thing is about the Brooklyn Bridge. It's an ode to that. So the bridge begins with a little epigraph here. It is attributed to the book of Job. From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. I'm not sure off the top of my head where in the book of Job that is from. If any of you know, feel free to say, and maybe it would probably be helpful to give a little clarity and context. I'm curious reading that now. So we'll dive in. The way that he structures it is, I believe, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It is 11 stanzas, 4 lines in each. With looks like 10 syllables in each line. The rhyme scheme, at least in terms of the kind of end syllable, there doesn't seem to be a rhyme scheme, and I'm trying to look here quickly before we go over it, because I just read this and had some thoughts, and I don't think there's a whole lot of internal rhyming. There are a handful, there's some ellipses in terms of punctuation. He uses an em dash a bit, kind of at the end of the first stanza with just a sharp break, and that's later on in the end of the end of the first line of the first stanza, and then before the beginning of the last line of the second stanza, which we'll get into. So I will read it here, and then we'll dive into it. So, To Brooklyn Bridge by Hart Crane. How many dawns, chill from his rippling rest, the seagull's wings shall dip and pivot him, shedding white rings of tumult, building high over the chained bay water's liberty. Then, with invalid curve, forsake our eyes, as apparitional as sails that cross some page of figures to be filed away, till elevators drop us from our day. I think of cinemas, panoramic slights with multitudes bent toward some flashing scene never disclosed, but hastened to again, foretold to other eyes on the same screen. And thee, across the harbor, silver paced as though the sun took step of thee, yet left some motion ever unspent in thy stride, implicitly thy freedom staying thee. Out of some subway scuttle, cell, or loft, a bedlamite speeds to thy parapets, tilting thee momently, shrill shirt ballooning, a jest falls from the speechless caravan. Down wall, from girder into street noon leaks, a ripped tooth of the sky's acetylene. All afternoon the cloud-flown derricks turn, thy cables breathe the North Atlantic still. And obscure as that heaven of the Jews, thy guerdon, accolade thou dost bestow, of anonymity time cannot raise, vibrant reprieve and pardon thou dost show. O harp and altar of the fury fused, how could mere toil align thy choiring strings? Terrific threshold of the prophet's pledge, prayer of pariah and the lover's cry. Again the traffic lights that skim thy swift unfractioned idiom, immaculate sigh of stars, beating thy path, condense eternity, and we have seen night lifted in thine arms. Under thy shadow by the piers I waited. Only in darkness is thy shadow clear. The city's fiery parcels all undone. Already snow submerges in iron year. O sleepless as the river under thee, vaulting the sea, the prairie's dreaming sod, unto us lowliest sometimes sweep, descend, and of the curved ship lend a myth to God. That is the opening. Quite a lot to unpack there. Hart Crane, I remember reading, loved New York. He couldn't get enough of it. He would write letters to his family about how much he was just infatuated by it. And what does Brooklyn Bridge speak of if we think of Brooklyn Bridge here? Brooklyn Bridge is progress. It can be, defined as modernization. And I find it interesting going back to the first stanza, line 4, over the chained bay waters liberty. Could be referring to the Statue of Liberty. It is not the bay waters possessive liberty. It's almost as if he's calling the Brooklyn Bridge liberty. He could be doing that. Giving imagery, kind of the seagull coming down. We start with the seagull, and then we go to the workday, till elevators drop us from our day. It drops us from our day, where perhaps if we're elevated, we're on high. We come down from that. Within the job, we can't focus. We can't ascertain beauty. The irony maybe is that because we view the bridge as something to just commute along, that we don't view the beauty in it or the majesty of it, unless we're architecture nerds or something. But it's almost like he's also giving an indictment of cinema as well with the third stanza. With I think of cinemas, panoramic sleights. It's like a sleight of hand. It's tricking you that multitudes are bent towards some flashing scene. Good Lord, when we think of films and TVs nowadays with the kind of inane, just mindless images and people kind of bent, people are sucked in. You're sucked in right now watching this video, but we're sucked in but they're hastened to again, they're foretold to other eyes on the same screen. It's almost like the people behind know what they're doing. They know that they're drawing us in, perhaps drawing us away from something like the bridge. And as though the sun took step of thee, yet left some motion ever unspent in thy stride. The sun acknowledges, but the bridge has freedom by staying in the same place. Perhaps because we move so often, we cannot get the panorama. Maybe that's the panoramic look. We go trying to look for the panorama, for the great images in the cinema on the screen. And of course, this was 1930. Cinema was a new thing. We go in search of great images, great imagery. Some of us do. Some for entertainment, but some to see things. But by staying in the same place, the bridge sees all in a certain respect. Out of subway scuttle, I like that. Cell or loft, a bedlamite speeds to thy parapets. A jest falls from the speechless caravan, tilting there momently. They're kind of running along. It's almost like a commuter coming up out of the subway, taking stock of the bridge, and just whatever he says, the speechless caravan, this kind of horde of people. And there are moments when if you've ever been to a big city, and yeah, there are moments where I can think, for example, it wasn't a bridge necessarily. It wasn't, but if anybody who has ever, as an American in particular, traveled to London, and you want to go see Parliament and Big Ben, you take the train to Westminster Station, and as you're coming out, literally out of Westminster Station, right across the street is Parliament. And then I remember I got out of Westminster Station, and I looked, I saw Parliament. I recognized, okay, that's Parliament right across the street from me. But I was wondering, Where's Big Ben? Where's Big Ben? I can't see it. It was also right in front of me. All I had to do was look up. And then I was like, wow, I didn't see that it was right in front of me, and I just had to look up. And that's almost like this. They come out of the subway, and I'm not too familiar with New York, so I can't speak to a specific subway station where it might be the case where you just kind of come up. You're drained from your day. You come up, and then all of a sudden it's there in front of you. Thy cables breathe the North Atlantic still, which I like. I like that still. This is going to the sixth stanza. I like that still. Thy cables breathe the North Atlantic still. Whether that be the North Atlantic still, kind of the still of the waters, or thy cables breathe the North Atlantic still, as if Crane, or this narrator, is almost confused that an object like the bridge would be in one place for so long, that if it can see, if it's an object of majesty, that it still breathes the North Atlantic air, as if it's impressive to be standing so long. O harp and altar of the fury fused, terrific threshold of the prophet's pledge, the prayer of pariah, which is that not an oxymoron, but is that a little like prayer of the pariah? If a pariah is somebody who's been thrown out, the prayer of the pariah should be a fruitless prayer, or the prophet's pledge and the lover's cry. It's all kind of there. Or whether he's talking about, I wonder if he's talking about the fury fused, O harp and altar, how could mere toil align thy choiring strings? So literally the structural integrity of the bridge. But then perhaps like it's the amalgamation and the culmination of all the sounds of Brooklyn, of New York, kind of building up all around it, which I think that's what he's going for. And then skipping ahead finally to the second to last stanza, under thy shadows by the pures I waited, only, and I love this line too, only in darkness is thy shadow clear. The city's fiery parcels all undone, already snow submerges an iron year. Where, ironically, because you might be less aware of it in the nighttime, that in the nighttime still, it's the edifice, it's still there. Maybe because the light could draw attention, but when the light dims, when the light goes down, the fiery parcels, or if the sun is the fiery parcel, the buildings are left. The buildings remain as they always have been. And if somebody knows, please drop a comment on, I should have looked this up before doing this, but I forget, the Brooklyn Bridge, was it the 1880s and 90s? I don't think the Brooklyn Bridge, was new in the 20s. I think it was built in the late 19th century, but I could be wrong. And then the final stanza here, just to conclude things, oh, sleepless is the river under thee, vaulting the sea, the prairie's dreaming sod, unto us lowly as sometimes sweep descend, and of the curved ship lend a myth to God. It's like it's a myth here. It precludes a myth, not like, or whether it welcomes in, because you're talking about the prairie sod, and you think of the Midwest, that it might be, the Brooklyn Bridge might be the gatekeeper to kind of the long tradition, to the myth of America, or whatever that might be. Whereas the Statue of Liberty welcomes, the Brooklyn Bridge precludes or forewarns, or gives voice to something. And that probably is true, come to think of it, because the Statue of Liberty was constructed by a Frenchman, not an American, and given to the United States as a gift. So that might be it. Even though the Statue of Liberty is iconic, the Statue of Liberty welcomes, give us your sick and give us your poor. I forget exactly how that dedication goes on the Statue of Liberty, but the Statue of Liberty historically would welcome in immigrants. That'd be kind of that first landmark that they would see. But then the Brooklyn Bridge is like, Now you see it, here's our accomplishment. And of course, this was published in 1930, and I think the Empire State Building, the Chrysler Building, I don't think were topped out or even construction began until the 30s. So when we think of Manhattan or Brooklyn nowadays, I mean, again, I think Statue of Liberty, then I think of Manhattan, like One World Trade Center, the Empire State Building, maybe the Chrysler Building, a couple, and I know that there's newer buildings now, but that then when we come in, we see first a true American construction that lends an eye to the myth of America, of greater America. So yeah, that is the conclusion of the Proem, as Hart Crane puts it. Let me know what you think of it, and I will see you guys next time as we get into part 1, Ave Maria.